My name is Mirsada Kadiric, and I was born in Bosnia, in the city of Prijedor, which is one of our major cities, but by American standards is quite small, with roughly 100,000 people living there. I had a very happy and lively childhood, but the most vivid memory I have is one hot summer day in the month of July in 1992, when I was just 10 years old. It was our typical Sunday afternoon family meal. My mom, dad, grandma and grandpa, and my 10-year-old self watching my dad enjoy the meal I helped prepare. Suddenly, we were startled by a large truck coming to an abrupt stop right in front of our home. In an instant, 50 heavily armed men in army uniforms surrounded our home and screamed to get out with our hands in the air. And that was the day they took my dad to a concentration camp, and the last time I ever saw him. A week later, they came back and took all of our valuable possessions, and a week after that, my mom and I were taken to a different concentration camp while they bombed our home to the ground. We would eventually be released and forced to flee the country, only to begin our long refugee journey. For those of you who may not be familiar, a refugee is a very specific title that's given to someone who's forced to leave their home, whether it be for their race, religion, nationality, or membership in a political group or a social group. And sadly, there are a lot of refugees in the world today. Over 65 million people are forced from their homes, but only 22,000 of them ended up in the United States last year. The rest of them are living in uncertainty in refugee camps all around the world, with very limited resources for even the most basic necessities for life, such as food, water, and shelter, and even less access to education, work, or medical care. I know my mom and I were one of the lucky ones when we came to the United States back in 1998. I was 16 years old at that time. Like so many people who have never been to the United States, the only image one has of America is that of Hollywood movies and TV shows. And I was no different. Being a teenager in the 90s, I was a huge fan of this little hit show called Beverly Hills 90210. Beach, palm trees, fancy cars, and beautiful people, that is what my little mind expected the United States to be like. You can only imagine the shock that I experienced when I ended up at Boone County High School in Florence, Kentucky instead. Muddy Ohio River, rolling hills of Kentucky, Chevys in the parking lots, and the word rebels plastered everywhere. It took me 6 months in the English as a second language class to finally understand what that word meant. I spent many of my days eating lunch all alone in the school cafeteria, and too many of my days being bullied by fellow classmates. With no one in my corner and struggling to adjust, I felt isolated and helpless. It's no surprise then that the happiest day of my short-lived high school career days was the day I graduated. And I felt a huge sense of relief once I got to Northern Kentucky University, where I experienced a bit of a moment of breakthrough my sophomore year of college. I happened to sit next to someone who was working for the college newspaper, The Northerner, and he was so intrigued by my story that he wanted to do a front page article titled "Bosnian Refugee Finds Peace on Campus." And there it was, my face plastered all over campus, and suddenly I was no longer a stranger. In fact, people were curious and they started asking me questions. They invited me into their homes, and I finally started to feel like I'm a part of this community. With my newfound sense of belonging, I didn't want to do anything to risk losing it. So I did everything that my new American friends did, which meant that my baggy jeans and sneakers were turned into skinny jeans and high heels. My family home-cooked meals were now drive-thrus at fast food restaurants. And even how I sounded, I felt a huge sense of pride anytime someone would say that they couldn't detect an accent when I spoke. The only time that somebody would actually question my belonging was when they would hear my name. and that's why I have a fake one. My go-to is Sarah when I am in restaurants, coffee shops, or other social places. Besides, who has the time or patience to spell or pronounce Mirsada every time? And in 2004, I officially became an American citizen too. That refugee title that I carried with me for so long was now a thing of the past. And I went on the next 10 years of my life building what I call my American dream. I graduated from NKU in 2004 as the outstanding student in marketing, and I got a great career in market research industry where I am to this day. I went back to NKU in 2009 and obtained my MBA, and in 2013 I was named NKU's Outstanding Young Researcher of the Decade. I had a great car, I had traveled around the world, I even had a place of my own. I was really comfortable living in my American bubble until the 2016 presidential election. I remember sitting in my London hotel room for one of my work trips, and I was watching the news. It was December 2015, and the presidential candidates just got done discussing immigration in the United States. And there was that word again, refugee. But the things that were being said, like, we don't know who they are, they have no documentation, and we don't know what they're planning, were so cruel that it personally touched me. Memories flash back of what it felt like to be a refugee. How we were forced from our home with nothing on us but the clothes on our backs. How we struggled to survive with no food or water. And how we ran to stay alive when they released us from the concentration camp and started shooting after us. That same night, I started to reflect on my personal feelings in writing, which I later published in my memoir. And I felt a huge sense of urge to get involved in the topic of refugees. So roughly a year later, I joined a local nonprofit organization called Refugee Connect, where I currently serve as the board president, but even more importantly, I help mentor 2 young refugee girls, Asma from Syria and Tirhas from Eritrea. Asma is an aspiring doctor who has straight A's after only being here for about 2 years. And Tirhas, who's also a straight A student, hopes to follow in my footsteps in the business world. They both just graduated from high school and are entering the University of Cincinnati in the fall. Refugees have always contributed to the advancements of this country. Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, and even Google's co-founder Sergey Brin were all once refugees here. Being a refugee, you are just so thankful to have a home without the fear for your life that you're willing like no one else to help contribute to your new community. In fact, I chose to stay in Northern Kentucky. I chose to buy my very first home here, and I'm here to stay. And even though I had a rough start at the beginning, I met some wonderful individuals along the way who really helped me find my voice and place in this great community. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping others who find themselves in my shoes today, finding resources and the necessary guidance so that they too can thrive in the future. Because who knows, they could be sitting in front of you in the future. I hope you will join me on August 7th from 9:30 Eastern Standard Time for ParentCamp Twitter chat to continue having this conversation about the refugee population and ways that you can welcome these newcomers to America.